KnockBack, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to KnockBack. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother Dagan, Fatly Adama Moriarty. Dagan, thank you for joining me today. How was your life?
I forgot about Fatly.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I forgot all about it. It seemed like so long ago now.
Yeah, I know.
Kyle, do you hear that fracking music? What
that
is
music?
That? Where's that music coming from?
Do
do do do do do do do.
Well, welcome, Dig. Today we're obviously going to talk about the third season of Battlestar Galactica. We'll get into that in a little while, but not in a little while, but momentarily. But
momentarily.
I was curious, how's everything going? You started a new job.
New job.
I'm curious how everything's going in your life. Right
yeah, now. We're like 2.25 ways in, 2 days and a quarter in. It's going good so far. I had an anecdote to tell you about the new job. Actually, you'll really appreciate this. I want to see your reaction to this actually, because my reaction yesterday was like, wait, what? So, start a new job. We're in a Zoom meeting yesterday. You know, animation is a lot of Zoom meetings, it feels like, since the age of Zoom, especially since the onset of COVID, right? It's like, right. I mean, I guess that's a lot of jobs, a lot of office type jobs. So, we're having a Zoom meeting. Me, the lead artist, like the art director, and another of my contemporaries, an animator. He's based up in Toronto, actually. And we're just talking about the conversations meandering into our families and kids and everything. And I said, yeah, when I get mad at my kids, I point to the mantle and I said, if it wasn't for you guys, that would be full lined with Emmy Awards. Which is a terrible thing to say, but they know that I'm joking. They also roll their eyes. It's also not true. It would definitely not be lined with Emmy Awards, but it's a nice scapegoat.
You did win an Emmy. You and your team won Emmy. So
yes, I won a team Emmy.
Emmy.
So you have Emmy.
An Emmy.
Yeah, that was a team thing at Sesame. But they win Emmys every year, so I just happened to be part of the team that year. I got nominated for 3 individual Outstanding Achievement in Animation Emmy Awards, but I lost every time. And then I used to be involved in the voting, so I couldn't. That was in like the mid-aughts in New York, so I couldn't really even participate in that window of time. But we were just laughing about that. And then the conversation kind of meandered over into like career trajectory and ascension and all that kind of stuff. And my lead, who I've known for a long time, but I haven't worked with him at Nickelodeon yet, obviously. He's like, our project that we're working on, which I can't talk about, is being actually looked at by the head of Paramount. Now, for those of you guys that don't know, Paramount is a gigantic media organization, one of the biggest in the world. And then underneath that is Viacom. And then underneath Viacom are all the things that we would know, right? MTV, VH1, Comedy Central, Nickelodeon.
CBS is in there, right?
CBS, yeah, of course. BET is in there, Spike. If that's
your favorite channel, right? You love BET.
BET. I just saw something that's going on with BET. Like they're having a whole new rollout or something.
Oh, interesting. I used to watch BET quite a bit because they had like great music shows. But I was always
like in the 90s and the aughts.
But I always felt like, I'm like, should I be watching this? Because I felt like,
Is this for me?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's for you.
It's like reading, it's like, what's the black magazine?
Ebony.
Ebony, right.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. I've been in barbershops before and I'm like, can I read this?
Yeah.
Am I allowed to read this?
Looking, enjoying it, but also looking over your shoulder. So the head of Paramount, of all things, is looking at our project, apparently. Like he's, I don't know how much it was the same thing when I was at Disney with Bob Iger. It's like, how much is Bob Iger really looking at this? The guy has like a million things to do, but apparently it's on his desk at some point. He probably looks at it and then, folds it up into a paper airplane and tosses it across the room, whatever. But my friend was like, do you know who Brian Robbins is? Now, Brian Robbins is the head of Paramount. And I said, no, I don't know who he is. He says, he played one of the uncles in Full House. Now I'm like, wait a second. Now I'm thinking Uncle Jesse and Uncle Joey, right?
Right.
And I'm like, no, that's not Brian Robbins. So he got confused. Apparently, this guy is an actor, dating all the way back to like the 70s. Character actor, mostly on television. He must have played Uncle Jesse's brother in a few episodes or something. But you would know him, Kyle. Go look up Brian Robbins and see what he looks like.
All right, let me see.
And you're going to be like, this is the head of Paramount. You're going to know immediately seeing his face.
I know this guy. Yeah.
Head of the class.
Yes.
He was in Head of the Class.
Yes, he's one of the kids in Head of the Class. Exactly.
I said,
exactly
Alexi,
right.
That's not Uncle Jesse. That's the guy from Head of the Class.
Yeah, you're right.
He's the head of all of Paramount. I was shocked. I was like, holy shit, that's the head of all of Paramount. When I was like 10 years old, I was watching him on Head of the Class.
I loved that show, by the way.
That was a great show.
Dude, I always longed to be in a class like that. What was I can't remember the teacher's name, but it was just such a cool, you know who he reminded me of? Do you remember Mr. Scott?
Yes.
At Belport?
I think about him a lot.
Yeah, Mr. Scott was a government teacher at Belport where we went to high school, and he was a really nice guy, but he was totally, I would imagine he was probably like a pothead and whatever, but he used to just like literally just, he was like this very folksy new age kind of guy, and he would just play his guitar like in the middle of class, and he was just out of his mind.
He was really crazy.
Yeah, and he was great. He was a really great man.
I loved him.
But
he would be in mid-sentence sometimes and just stop. Whatever he was saying, he would look at everybody and go sit in the corner and start playing his acoustic guitar. Or just looking at everybody. Like, I think it was his dry sense of humor.
Yeah.
You know, and back then you're kind of just more confused. You know, you're like in 10th grade and you're like, what the hell is this guy doing?
Yeah, he was great. So that's who that teacher reminds you of.
He really does.
Awesome. It's a great job.
And I think I was trying to put a name to a face of, we were talking about Ghostbusters last week, that sequence where Bill Murray's kind of interviewing the two young ESP candidates and is like the cute blonde. I think she was one of the classmates in that show too. And then the nerdy guy who does like a million cartoon voices was the other key player for like the student trio with Brian Robbins. And I was just like, whoa, can you imagine, like, even think back to, I think his name is Brian Levine. I think he must have changed it to Brian Robbins at some point. Can you, like, that's some kind of crazy ascension. It's like this guy who did like bit parts in sitcoms. Now he's the head of like one of the biggest media conglomerates on the planet.
Yeah, it's really,
I was shocked.
I'm reading his, he's got like a who's who here. Cause he was in everything. He was in
everything.
First of all, he was in Archie Bunker's Place, which is hysterical, but he was also in, he was in that, but he's also in Facts of Life, Taxi, Three's Company, Knight Rider, Different Strokes, Newhart, Charles in Charge, Growing Pains, Mr. Belvedere. And then he does things a little later, Kids Incorporated. And then, like you said, Full House. He is in 2 episodes of that. Okay,
only 2 episodes. It's so crazy that my friend knew him from that.
But you know what it reminds me of, Dig? And we've talked about this in the past. I want to look up her name, but this is just like, this is the old. No, I don't want the. I'm looking for 90210. Here we go. Yeah, this is just like Gabrielle Carteris from 90210. She was like Andrea Zuckerman. She's 30-year-old.
Oh, of course,
high school
yeah, of course, yeah.
10th grade or whatever. She's the head of SAG-AFTRA now.
That's right. You were telling me about that.
Isn't that weird? So there's all sorts of weird things that people just
It's cool, actually.
Yeah, it is.
I think something with, what's her name from Wonder Years? Danica.
Oh, Danica. Yeah, Danica. She's like a mathematician or something, right?
Oh, okay. I thought she was involved in Hollywood in some capacity.
Danica McKellar. She might be, but I thought, didn't she like...
No, you might be right.
Yeah, it says she is an American actress, mathematics writer, and education advocate.
She's super, super, super smart.
Yeah, she went to UCLA. Yeah, I thought I remember. Yeah, I guess she kind of left and then came back. I don't know what's going on with her, but yeah, she's Winnie Cooper.
It's interesting. Yeah, I was shocked. I was like, I can't wait to tell Colin about this. Who knew?
That's awesome. I like you should, if you ever meet him, you should be like, dude, I was a big fan.
Well, that's the thing. You're kind of starstruck on 2 fronts then. You know what I mean? It's like, this is my big boss who's never going to know my name. 40,000 employees or something under Paramount's umbrella. They have a whole skyscraper in New York. And then, but for me, it's more like the 80s. Probably also, I haven't looked into his filmography to this capacity, but I'm sure he had to do cartoon voices in the 80s too, you would imagine.
Yeah, like I would assume so. Right?
So it's like, wow. And Kids Incorporated, I think he was in Kids Incorporated and stuff. I was like, whoa, like, that's my childhood.
It's interesting because if you ever got a chance to meet him, right? Like he was in the office and you had like a moment to just say anything to him, right?
Yeah.
I would judge in my head. I'm like, is this the moment to be like, like, I wonder if you were like, I really liked you on Head of the Class. I wonder if you'd be like, that'd be
blow it
cool.
Off.
Or if he would be like, like, what are you talking to me about Head of the Class for?
Right.
But I feel like he would probably be pretty, like, dude, I literally loved you on Head of the Class for like over 100 episodes. I just wanted to let you know. Yeah. Like, how could he be mad about that?
Yeah.
I've met actors in the past where I've said things like that.
Oh yeah.
Like where I'm like, I really like you in this. I really like you in that. And that's all I say. And then I just, because at IGM people used to come in and out, so you don't want to bother them.
Yeah,
you try
met
to
a lot of people back then.
try to treat treat them, leave them alone. But
yeah, treat them like humans, but let them know you're psyched for their work. Why not? What about you, my friend? What's going on in your life this week?
nothing really.
No?
Yeah, just hanging out and getting through some things. Gonna have to start up Metal Gear soon here because we're doing that soon. Metal Gear Solid 3. But yeah, otherwise just working and just listening to music. I was listening to Nirvana today.
Okay.
It's funny. Nirvana is one of those bands where I can go like a couple of years and be like, I really don't want to hear anything from this band. I'm just so tired of hearing Nirvana songs. And that I mean, they're an amazing band, obviously. I actually vividly remember you having the cassette tape of Nevermind.
Yeah, got it for Christmas.
And I remember being like, like it's the Naked Baby, and it was like fun. I remember being on your bed like wow, this is up. But then I was watching Monday Night Football, I think it was. It might have been Sunday Night Football, and they always have like a good cacophony of intro and exit songs. And I'm always like, oh shit, and they had like I think they were playing Seattle, so they had just a run of great grunge and post grunge stuff or whatever. And one of the songs that they played was In Bloom, but just like the guitar part of it. And I was like,
sure,
oh, man,
yeah,
I fucking love that song. So I added it to my playlist, and then I put it on today when I was running on my elliptical. And I don't know if I've said this, but I sing really loud when I listen to my music and I work out. Like I'm like screaming, and my neighbors probably are like, what is going on?
Because you can't hear yourself, or because you're
because I just love it. Like I'm working out. I have a lot of energy. I'm just like, and it gets my voice going for the show and stuff. So like just a half an hour ago, I was like screaming In Bloom on the elliptical. He's the one who likes all our pretty songs.
It's an iconic song.
I know,
album.
Dude. That song fucking rocks. Don't know what it means.
It was such a breath. It's like for you younger cats out there, you don't even know. Like early '90s, that style of music, particularly Nirvana, but I can think of a lot of others. Such a breath of fresh air. I mean, it was like I guess it was kind of the birth of alternative music as we know it now too. But coming out of rock and rap and the other genre, of course, disco and all of the instrumental electro pop stuff of the '80s, like. It was probably the biggest paradigm shift I could ever remember in music. It was like, wow, music is really, or, the classic rock that we grew up with listening to our parents' stuff, whether it was Santana or Fleetwood Mac. Like it was changing, it was stopping on a dime and just taking a curve, and it's like, whoa, like I can't even, that time, say what you want about the 90s, but as we were going from the 80s into the 90s, it was so crazy to think about like how things were changing. And that probably dovetailed with my age too, because I was discovering my body.
Oh, I hate that term. What does it mean?
Oh, let's change the subject. I'm getting red. Look. Oh, dear. Clutch the pearls.
We can have some more.
Yeah, let's go back to that.
Nature is a whore.
Apologies to Nirvana for taking that conversation into unseemly territory.
Tender age and blue.
What's also crazy about that album? Not to linger on this for too long, but
we should just do this.
Smells Like Teen Spirit was the iconic song that everybody wanted the album for, right? We loved the music video, loved the song. There was a 2 or 3 day period where it's like all the other tracks on that album were a bother. You just wanted to get to Teen Spirit. Right. Then, once those songs kind of took shape in our heads, we were like, the whole album was a masterpiece. I mean, obviously it's a masterpiece.
Definitely.
But yeah, it was even obvious to us, grungy little 16-year-olds, circa 1991 or whatever it was. 1990 or 91?
91. 91.
So, yeah, my friend.
Very, very cool. Well, let's get into the show, Deke.
Battlestar
Galactica Season 3. What? Now, it's funny. I was worried about this because this is the weakest season of Battlestar, I think.
Okay.
I think a lot of people think that too. And there are reasons for that, and we can talk about that. I think you can see what they're trying to do, and I think it failed. And so I think you see a huge reaction to that in Season 4 when they're very hyper-focused on the actual story. But you had messaged me early on, like maybe a quarter through, and you're like, I don't know, man. Like, and I actually tried to give you an exit. I'm like, dude, I don't want. I was like, if you really don't want to do this, like, I don't think anyone's gonna care that much if we don't finish. But
You did.
you said you wanted
were
to
gracious about that.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not going to force. You're like, you have like 14 episodes left. If you think it's that bad, then I really don't think we should do it. But you stuck with it, and I'm glad you did, because this season to me, and I wrote extensive notes as I was watching it, is just so up or down. And I was remarking to Micah that I remember at the time thinking, and I think it's pretty, a lot of people feel this way, like, man, you could have cut 8 episodes out of this season, and it would have no bearing whatsoever on what people actually care about. Now, I like filling in different stories. I like meeting people, right? Like, we're going to do Razor soon, which is, we're going to learn all about Admiral Kane, and we're going to go back to the Pegasus. That's a fucking great movie, right? And we'll do that in December. And they actually, if you watch it on Peacock, as I told Dagan, they actually have it as listed as a 21st episode of season 3. And I was like, don't watch it. It's not a real episode. I don't know
really
why
glad you warned me. I might have not caught that.
I don't know why they did that. You would have been so confused because you're like, why are we back like before the attack? The hell's going on here? You know, so yeah, that would have been confusing. So I don't know why they did that, but it is in sequential order. That's when it came out. So I think that's when they wanted to. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that's why it's there. Yeah, it makes sense in terms of sequence, but it's just like it was its own standalone release. Like, it was a big deal when it came out. So had nothing to do with the 3rd season. But I'm curious what you think of this season, because it is a lot of wasted time. It's a lot of one-off stories. The kind of lore about this is that Sci-Fi apparently was quite concerned that the show was just way too focused on the beat-to-beat drama of from the beginning to the end, which is what it is. And they were like, no one can access this show if you just found it now. And you have to remember that their mindset was, it's not very easy to catch up. So we're just, because this was like at best, you had Netflix by mail. You could also go buy the DVDs at the store or whatever, but it wasn't like you can just be like, oh, season 5 is coming out, I'm just going to stream all the other seasons. That wasn't an option. So as a result of that, they wanted to make it, I think, more accessible. And so you have episode and like kind of get to know the characters and just kind of get in.
Sure.
And so that's where the boxing episode comes in, and the boxing episode is notorious.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah, and there's just a lot of wasted time. And they happen in bursts. Like, I think it was episodes, I'm looking through my notes, maybe I'll find it in a little while. Yeah, it was like episodes 5 and 6, and then I think episode 8, 9, 10, and then it's like weird things where it's like, damn, this is all just wasted time. And what was funny was at the end, when you meet the captains from some of the other ships, at the trial, it's like these are the people we want to know more about. Like, why are we wasting time on all of this ephemera that has nothing to do with the story when we actually don't know shit about almost any of the other ships? Like, what happened to the prison ship? And we go to the Tillium ship, but it's like, what's been going on there the entire time, et cetera, and so on. So I'm just curious where you settled on the season and if you found it better than you thought it was. Because I do think Crossroads, the 2-part episode that ends, is excellent.
Oh my god, and so good.
And I think there are a lot of cool moments, including finally meeting some of the Cylons, like the hybrids and all of that, which I love. And so there is really cool stuff buried in this season. But I would say that is the key word, buried in this season. So anyway, I'm rambling. What did you make of season 3?
Well, you know what? It's funny. You and I did have kind of an ongoing dialogue, mostly via text, over the 3 or 4 weeks that we were watching. It's the better part of a month. And we were talking about it, and you did graciously give me an out. At first, I was like, dude, I don't know. It's starting to stray into Star Trek territory for me. And, I have to say, go back and listen to our first 2 episodes, seasons 1 and 2. I mostly did like the series so far. I kind of ebbed and flowed with it, the series generally meandering into like what I feel personally isn't too far into Star Trek territory. And so far as tone and atmosphere, crossing the line of cheesiness a little bit, but mostly I've really enjoyed it. For some reason, with the undertaking of season 3, I think it was a combination of things, in all fairness, right? You have a 20-episode thing that you have to digest. Each episode is the better part of an hour. So, when you're doing that for a show and you want to have a reasonable, intellectual, somewhat intelligent discussion on something, first of all, I'm an old crusty dad. It's taken up my media time. So going in, I was like a little bit leery, like, oh man, I don't know, like, how is this going to go? So I was already a little bit biased against it going in. For some reason, I was just feeling a little overly pessimistic. And it is interesting. And also, I have to say, I was excited when you and I started to have those discussions. You were like, I don't know, maybe we pull the plug. And I said, no, dude, this would actually be amazing, because if I actually got all the way through a season of something, a topic that we do, right, and I was down on it, that would be an interesting discussion for KnockBack.
Sure.
It's striking to me because we're very lucky. Most of the things we cover, obviously, we pick a lot of the things. There's some fan shows and topics, but we pick the lion's share. Mm-hmm. So it's not a surprise that we would enjoy most of the topics, but we're also very lucky, very fortunate that for the most part, we're very up on stuff and we get to kind of gush about various topics. So I thought it would be an interesting look for KnockBack if we got to, say something and break down something negatively. Didn't turn out that way. Started a little negative, got positive, got a little negative, and then by the time the season ended, I was really up on the show. I think they do a lot of things. They do a great job. And, for this season, from the outset, I'll say, I've very rarely witnessed a piece of media, movie, television series, whatever, that goes from almost insufferable and unbearable at times to being bloody brilliant. I mean, nearly perfect. I would say the perfection, the quality is risen to a crescendo, I would say, in episode 19. I was blown away with the writing and the acting in that episode. Amazing. And also, to tell you guys, too, if you haven't seen the series yet or you haven't seen the season yet, don't spoil it for yourselves. There's a lot of things that we'll discuss that are, this is a series of reveals, cliffhangers, and tension. So it's worth watching before you listen to the conversation. But I will say one thing before we go in and sort of break it down in a molecular sort of way, and there's so much to say, dude. I'm really excited. Is that one thing for this season that I will say, one thing that you already spoke on a little bit that I didn't mind was actually the one-off sort of bottle episodes, because I don't mind that because I like the character building, and this show juggles a lot of characters for good or for bad. Mostly they do a pretty good job with it, I think, in all fairness, but I don't mind those episodes because they're character building moments and character relationship moments that help flesh out all the characters that we're following in this world. There's a lot of main characters in this series, so I didn't mind it for that.
Big ensemble, definitely. I agree.
Yeah, great ensemble, big ensemble, large ensemble. And one thing, though, that I noticed about this season, and I think where this series in general is lacking, there's very, very little levity in the entire 20-episode run of this particular season. It gets way too bogged down in, at times, conversation, exposition, and dialogue. As good as the writing is, and as good as the ideas are in the writing, and it's a very unique work of science fiction, especially for something that you have to remember is a retelling, of a 1970s series. So you have to remember that. So, but I think they get a little bogged down and they got a little heavy. Like, I was waiting for those pockets of sort of levity, and I think there's like one in the entire season where it's like, that's intentional levity, where it was a conversation, I believe, between Admiral and Madam President, and they're sort of laughing about things and joking about things, and it's only like a 2-minute reprieve. Even that boxing episode, I call it the grudge match episode, you could have really had fun with that, but it mostly centered on Apollo and Starbuck's shit, like their tension and their beef with each other, which kind of got bogged down in all that Starbuckness for me. So that was the big thing, is it gets talky with the exposition, and that's where it starts to cross over for me into Star Trek territory, where it's like, all right, like, it's my inner Star Wars and my inner Blade Runner, and my inner Matrix, like that. I want to see that. And when it starts to meander away from that, I think I have my own inner biases, especially with sci-fi. That's where it was a problem for me. But I loved the whole experience, the highs and the lows, and the way it kind of peaked and valleyed. And I can't wait to get into it. I think they did a great job. There was a couple of things that they missed. Tom Zarek, for instance, they really didn't flesh that character out like they should have, but they mostly touched on, I would say, 95% of the characters and helped build the characters with their own little, bottle episodes, really, is what I would call it. So, if that's a fair place to start, my friend.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, I'm glad that you ended up having a good experience with it, because I think I got to the end of it too, and I was thinking, this isn't as, I never thought it was bad, but I'm like, this isn't quite as weak as I thought, because I think a lot of the episodes early on or midway through, I was like, it was confirming kind of some of the things that because I really like lore in shows like this. And
Sure.
you have to remember that I was watching this now when it was on. So at this point, we were getting like really annoyed. It's like, where are the Cylons? Like, what is going on? How does everything work? And they do start to kind of get into all of that, which is cool. But the show, of course, begins with the Cylon occupation of this planet that they found, this rugged planet where they can live in kind of the equatorial band and eke out and survive. And they're there for, I think, 100 and they're there, I think, for a while, and then we find them 134 days into the Cylon occupation. The Cylons have arrived, and this is an interesting situation because I think now certain characters are becoming more important and rising to the fore, and I actually think are performed really well. Like, I really think that Ty during this season is awesome, and
awesome job,
really well done. And like, it's finally, you get to see him as like kind of a guerrilla leader, and it's like sending out suicide bombers to do dirty work, and they're trying to kill Baltar. And we see Chief with the labor union, which is kind of cool. There's a lot of things that are really interesting. Kind of weird that it would reduce to this, but this was the time where I feel like the show feels the most realistic, because it kind of embraces its cold steel brutalism and fascism in a way that I feel like these particular situations would reduce. So you'd have some sort of school for kids, but it's probably not really doing very much. And you have some sort of labor market, but it's not very organized. And you have a Vichy type puppet government controlled by people that can just wipe you out at a moment's notice. And you're kind of curious why they're not wiping you out. But behind the scenes, what I think is cool about this is that the Cylons are starting to fall apart, and the humans don't really know that. And what's interesting is that the Cylons start falling apart and even decommission one of their own and shelve them, because a civil war is basically brewing about what they've done and what they will continue to do. And I think there are a lot of religious illusions here, and I think there are a lot of 9/11 illusions here. Again, remembering when it was written and came out during the War on Terror. Now we're in Iraq in this point. This is 2005, 2006, I think. So what did you think about the focus on this rocky outpost that they find and that they're found, but that also the ships in orbit and the battle stars jump away? And so while the occupation is happening, they're figuring out what they can do with a very skeleton crew. And for the first time, everyone is apart. Maybe the first time since, let's think, like when maybe Hilo is back on Caprica. Like, that was the first time. And, Starbuck goes back to Caprica and stuff. But everyone's somewhat united, and then they're split apart again.
Sure.
So what did you think about kind of this opening act of the season as they deal with the Cylons and get off the planet?
Yeah, it was really cool with the whole New Caprica occupation and a big part of the human population being under the oppression of the enemy. And it's a really oppressive place to start, because you're like, how is this small or this divided faction of humans going to rescue the other faction of captured humans, essentially? And how are they going to continue on with this? How are they possibly going to get out of this situation? And I love the way that scenario built up some of the characters, like you were saying, with Colonel Ty, with his wife Ellen, with how the Admiral is going to handle everything and Madam President are going to handle everything, and the people that were down, boots on the ground in that colony, in that settlement, or in that whatever it is, internment camp, whatever you want to call it, and how each one was going to play their part in order to move on, in order to escape. That was a pretty cool place to start. And then it was the beginning of a season that really elicited my empathy, in, like you say, in a very realistic way, for the human plight against the Cylons, because they're always encountering something. Also, the Cylons were encountering their own plights as well. They had their virus that they were dealing with, their internal struggles with who was going to be a part of their ongoing mission to find Earth and who had to be, as you said, decommissioned. And with the humans, it was kind of one thing after the next. Once they survived that new Caprica thing, then they're moving on to, they have other things, the food supply contamination, the labor strike, is it Tilium?
Tilium,
Is that their field?
Tilium. Yeah.
Dealing with that whole thing, dealing with their internal struggles, their infight, the political infighting. They're dealing with Gaius's trial. So there's always some sort of impediment along this whole series so far, but especially in this season, for the humans to deal with. And they do it in a very realistic way, like you're saying, with the domestic terrorism, alluding to things that we have gone through ourselves in the last 20, 25 years with, harkening back, as you said, to 9/11 and everything. It was I love when sci-fi is grounded that way and it's believable that way. And they do a great job this season with that. And it's one thing after the next, and it's stressful. There's a lot of tension, and there's proper payoff too, which is cool. And I think that's probably where, Kyle, like those one-off-ish episodes get annoying, because you're waiting for a payoff, from the previous plot point that was has yet to be settled. Right. So you're waiting for those things. You're waiting for the other shoe to drop, and those one-off episodes. But I like the way those one-off episodes do sort of pay off in the end. In again, letting us know a little bit more about the characters, their biases, a lot of their internal problems, maybe relationship issues, but also the gray behind each character. Even characters that are inherently good, like the Admiral and Madam President, like you see their internal biases, their problems, the fact that they're not all good. And conversely, the Cylons aren't all bad.
Right. It's very complicated. I mean, I've said before, Rosalind's a fascist, right?
Yeah.
There's no bones about that. And it makes she's one of the great characters on the show. I think one of the most realistic characters on the show too. And obviously her relationship with Adama is awesome.
Oh, it's so good.
And really fleshed out in this. And I love it. I love them together. They're such great actors. But you're right. Like the allusions to the war on terror, I found very overt. And I think it's going to be lost on new generations of people for sure. But it really hits you over the head with it. Like just in those first few episodes, they have like illegal imprisonment and rendition, indefinite imprisonment, torture, erosion of rights for safety, and like we said, the suicide bombing, and there's treason and insurgency and counterinsurgency and double agency, and there's all sorts of things, and they just throw it at you, and it was so timely. I can't stress that enough to people, how timely it felt and how much I remember it as I was watching this. But I'm also interested in not the destruction of the Cylons, that's not what's happening, but the uncoupling of the Cylons from their mission. This is happening at a rapid rate, and they're starting to disagree. And in fact, the models that usually speak as one are starting to disagree amongst themselves. So there's different 6s and different 3s, and it's all getting messed up. And I especially love when number 3 goes, before she's decommissioned, she goes and speaks to a mystic that's like all strung out on Kamala. And you start realizing that there is a spiritual connection between everyone. Also, the shared dreams that they have, and that this does seem to be turning into a biblical story, I think quite literally. In fact, leaving New Caprica is, I think, an allusion to just to Exodus, right? And the idea of just taking the people and leaving and
right.
Getting out of danger and surviving and living to see another day. And I really enjoyed that as the humans begin to see their own role in the prophecies that are coming about. And it's like you said, sci-fi, because we were talking about Dune recently, and similar, where sci-fi that is grounded, and I hate the word gritty and shit, but that's gritty and lived in. And Star Wars did a really great job on this, as we've said. You have the really clean Imperial starships, and then you have like Mos Eisley, and you have really beautiful TIE fighters, and then you have X-wings and Y-wings that look like they're strung together. And I feel like we're kind of getting a little piece of this as humans are running out of options. They're running out of goods. And part of that frustrates me as I watch the show, because I'm like, why does Laura Rosalind's hair look so good? Why is this place so clean? Where are you getting this liqueur in your bar? And like there's a lot of questions. And I keep trying to tell myself, like, there's just a lot of people in on these different ships that might be able to do these kinds of things, and we don't really know what they're capable of. So I try to keep an open mind there. But I guess what I'm saying is that the whole new Caprica situation shows that the Cylons are caught in this existential religious conundrum, and that they are dealing with it for the first time. And I think humans have been embedded with this. They're polytheistic in the show, but they are embedded with this struggle and the knowledge of the 13th colony and this planet and the various gods or whatever, while the Cylons are monotheistic and think that they have a direct connection to God, but are realizing that their fates are intertwined. And it's interesting, although a little silly, to be like, we made the wrong choice. What did we do that to them for? And it's almost comical because it's over. I mean, they're basically done. And they're so far, by the way, from their home system by the end of this that who the hell even knows where they are compared to that. So what did you make of the Cylons on New Caprica, their relationship, of course, to not only Gaeta, which I think is really interesting, but of course, Baltar, and their own struggle as they kind of start fracturing, and some of them start going along with, there's a Sharon model and a Six model that are basically with them by the end of the season.
Right. Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about what you think about the Cylons uncoupling, and it's on the precipice of us learning more about how they operate too, which is cool. And their astral projections and the hybrids and all this kind of stuff. So talk to me a little bit about the Cylons on New Caprica and what you think about them.
One thing I love about the series is, much like Star Wars, you see things from the antagonist's perspective and the protagonist's perspective, and you get behind the lines of both fronts and you get to see things from both points of view, which is, I think, really cool. And just like the good guys in this episode, the so-called good guys, we got to know a lot of these Cylon characters a little more, or I would say considerably more, in this specific season. And I love that they play up the similarities despite the conflict, right? The deadly conflict between these two races. You see the similarities between the Cylons and the humans. They're both longing for and looking for a place in the galaxy. They're both striving for survival to perpetuate their race. They essentially, at their core, want the same thing. So it makes for an interesting conflict because they're both justified. But I got one thing about the series, and I think they have to be a little careful about this, is it gets a little confusing. It has great ideas. It loves to play up the ideas in the writing, but despite the complexity, the seeming complexity of the Cylons, then you have, as you said, the iterations of each number and how, they're kind of flying in the face of each other, and there's internal conflict now. And then, there's the inherent biases of the supposedly good Cylons behind the human lines, and how a lot of people still don't trust them in the Sharon / Athena character and the iteration of 6. And now there's going to be more, which we'll talk about, that seemingly want to be, the new 4 that we're introduced to. And we'll get to this at the end of the episode, I'm sure. But, how they're like coming out for the first time. We're seeing them come out. They're revealed, and they're doubling down on, no, we're good guys. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to do fuck this. Like, it doesn't matter that that's what we are. Like, we're still going to be who we actually thought we were, type of thing. So it makes for a lot of interesting things. I started to get a little confused in this series, of having to go back and rewatch, which is kind of a challenge on Peacock because there's like really lags with the service. Peacock needs to work on their system a little bit.
Yeah, it's not great.
It's not clean, know. But, I think for the most part, in the end, I feel pretty content that I got everything. But I loved learning about, number 1, who was, I think initially he was the priest for the colonies, for the humans. And then number 2, who's the guy that was shacking up with Starbuck on New Caprica. And then 3, of course, is Lucy Lawless's Deanna, who is a fascinating character, another femme fatale in the spirit of another 6 character. So I loved getting to know, and then of course number 4 and number 5, I loved getting to know these actually number 4 I think was Simon from last season, but getting to know these characters a little bit and what they want, and the fact that they're striving for the same things when they find that what is that colony, the Jupiter what do they call it? The five. Oh, I can't think of it.
The Eye of Jupiter. Is that what you're
The
talking
Eye
about?
of Jupiter.
Yeah.
With the whole thing with Starbuck and the Eye of Jupiter, and both, sort of vying for the same thing. It reminded me of that G.I. Joe movie when Cobra and G.I. Joe are both racing for the weather dominator, right? They both wanted the same exact
thing. There's like 3 parts
of
it or something, right? And they have to like go and find it or something. Yeah.
Right. And, like this kind of reminded me of that. I think even number 1 was like in the Indiana Jones getup and stuff like that. It was like harkened back to like those old adventure serials and Indy and G.I. Joe and stuff for me. So it was fun. But, I loved getting to know both sides. And I love that you see, you're sort of able to get a glimpse into both sides of the conflict and see kind of who you're sympathizing with, at any given time, and how those sympathies could shift throughout even one 20 episode season. Like, will you be a little more in step with the Cylons? Like, okay, I get what they want, What did you think of, like, one thing that threw me off a little bit with the Cylons, and I know they have to kind of create a departure. You see, now you're seeing inside some of the Cylon ships, and it gets a little B-movie sci-fi campy with the blinking, checkered lights and all that kind of thing. And then kind of the Minority Report-ish tub of ooze that they're inside of and stuff. What did you think of all that? Did you buy all of that? Did you think it was cheesy?
I personally like that stuff. Like I like the Cylon ships. I like how they put their hands in the like water and like connect to it.
I forgot about that.
And like we see Sharon in season 2 like put a wire in her arm or whatever, but it's like an organic, it's like an organic thing I think it's interesting because I don't know what else it could have been. I like that it fuses organics with metals and everything like that.
Yeah, it's like a biomech
right and
type deal.
And I love the hybrid. Like, I think that's one of the coolest parts of the show, that there's this thing that they don't even really understand connected to each of their capital ships that talks constantly, and all the instructions and the ship's telemetry and all that go through her. What did you think of that? Because that, and I especially love how each of them have a different interpretation of what the hybrid even is and what it structures. And I love how I think they say Leoben believes that everything it says is intentional and it has purpose. And there are people that, I guess, record everything they say and try to make sense of it. And I do like when it's like, jump, like she like goes at the end and then she like opens her eyes and the ship jumps. I think that's really cool. Did you like that? Or do you think that was
That's so cool. It really reminds me of like anime sci-fi, especially the stuff in the late 80s, early 90s, like Macross, where there's like, yeah, there's some sort of mysterious, or like a lot of good sci-fi, there's some sort of mysterious, all-powerful entity or whatever controlling everything that's, like you said, even mysterious to them, even mystical to them, that they even have like a lack of understanding of. And that's the type of thing too, like, and knowing there's only one more season and like an offshoot movie, like how much are we going to find out about this? What's laying at the foundation of the Cylons? Like how many questions are they going to answer? There seems like there's a lot going on that we still don't know, but I love that. I mean, that's proper writing, for stringing us along and for asking questions and for wanting answers and sometimes not getting them, or getting them in very small doses and stringing us along. The series does a great job at that. It's really, sometimes they drop a bead or they, like I was really bothered, for instance, in this particular season of the lack of playing up the angle of father-daughter between Admiral and Starbuck. I feel like they weren't doing that. Like for some reason, they just dropped that whole relationship until they didn't. And then as soon as they started doing it in episode 16, you knew something was going to go wrong for one of those two characters. And you know what I mean? It's like, oh, we forgot, like we went 15 episodes and didn't establish that Admiral feels fatherly over Starbuck. Or Starbuck looks up to Adama like a father. So we got to put that in real quick. But for the most part, 95% of the time, the juggling act is successful, which is, that's easier said than done when you're juggling a cast of this magnitude. You know what I mean? You have a lot of characters, a lot of plates in the air, a lot of balls in the air, a lot of...
juggling a lot of balls.
Oh, hey. Juggling a lot of balls.
So I wanted to ask you about the fleet at this point too, before obviously there's this great conflict and everyone escapes, or many people escape. is that there's like a nihilism that's creeping into the fleet. And I think that that's really interesting because it starts asking the questions of like, what are we even doing? And I think that's where Fatly Adama comes from, which was like a very controversial thing at the time. And I remember actually there was like, I don't know where it was. It might've been on the IGN message boards or something. Someone had a name Fatly Adama, which I thought was like a really great username. But there's a nihilism as they don't really know what to do and they're kind of stuck and they don't know exactly how to deal with the problem. At the same time, the Cylons are starting to really succumb to this very binary computer-like thinking. Like they are horrified of retaliation. It's really interesting. Like it's embedded in them that they understand that it reminds me a little bit of the Japanese in World War II in such that maybe the power differential is much different, but Japan hit the United States knowing the United States was going to retaliate, but they were doing it to buy time and reinforce themselves so they can do what they need to do or whatever. And the Cylons have just this real paranoia of the humans doing to them what they did and brings up this real moralistic quandary. So what did you think about what was going on with the ships? It was cool to see just like a skeleton crew and also learn a little bit about some of the relationships that have occurred or solidified since this happened, including Chief with Callie, although that's on the planet surface, and you have D with Apollo, of course. So talk to me a little bit about what you think of the ships early on and what's going on with the Adamas, etc.
Yeah, the whole thing, I meant to investigate this and I didn't. The whole thing with Jamie Bammer, like, did he have some put on weight and then they had to write that in, or was that an intentional story arc? That's something I would like to know about because it was very odd. You know, it was interesting. It was totally, it's totally fine. And you know what, the way they did it and the way he trained with Hilo and everything like that and lost the weight and he got back in shape and, became this, this Han Solo-ish type swagger, pilot with swagger again or whatever. Right. And then, of course, he has his law arc later on. But I wondered what the story was with that because it seems like something where maybe Jamie Bammer put on the weight and then they're like, all right, well, obviously you're a key component to the series. We got to kind of write around this. But at the same time, you're going to have to shed like whatever it was. Like he was pretty large, like probably 50 pounds or something.
Yeah, it's unclear. Like I didn't know if it was like a fat suit or with makeup.
That's
or if it was
a possibility.
Or if it was like Mac on Always Sunny in Philadelphia where he intentionally gained the weight or
right.
What I don't know. I have no idea. I always assumed it was just it was striking because they actually don't even mention it until I think his dad insults him. Or something like that.
Something happens there where it's like, his dad kind of puts him on the path of losing weight or whatever. But it was interesting. But it was also part of my journey in the beginning with this series where it was like, what is, where are we going here? Like, what kind of cheese are we crossing into? Potential cheese. But with the fleet, I keep meaning to do this as well. Like, I want to know. It's a very dynamic looking, visually, it's a very cool looking fleet. You have this Battlestar and you have this civilian fleet in tow. And you have these really cool designed ships and they do a really good job with continuity and consistency as far as like seeing the same ships. And some of them look, very dynamic and some of them have very distinctive shapes and everything. I keep meaning to look at like a fan chart of each one, not only the names, but what they do. And like you said, it was cool to meet some of the captains of these ships or admirals, whatever you want to call them, later on in Gaius's trial. But it was cool to get out of the Galactica and get into some of these, like the Tinium or Tillium?
Tillium,
the Tillium mining ship, and get off the Galactica and get into some of these, because you're constantly curious, knowing there's like 45, 50, whatever thousand people, and they're all occupying these different ships. They're not all on Galactica. They're not all on Madam President's luxury liner. They're spread out between a bunch of ships. So to get to know a little bit about the civilian fleet and the people that live inside them and stuff like that, it made it more realistic, and it puts you behind the lines of more than just the soldiers and more than just the enemy, actually what's going on with the people, which I think they could even, in all fairness, I think they could even do a better job with that. But at least they started to get more into that where you could see, get a better overview of what's going on with the humans in general, not just the people fighting on the front lines. If that makes sense.
Definitely. Let's talk a little bit about this battle, which I know you like, when the human fleet returns. And there's a raptor that makes contact with the resistance, and they're coordinating with each other. And it's really cool. There's actually an amazing looking scene where the Battlestar Galactica jumps in to so close to the planet that it's like crashing, careening,
So
and all the
cool.
Vipers are leaving, and then it jumps away or whatever. It's just neat. There's a lot of really cool stuff, and of course they sacrifice Pegasus
Oh,
at this point as well to get away, which is a really cool scene as well. And they take a bunch of base stars with them. What did you make of this battle to get off of the planet, and also the way that they mix in some really interesting stuff, like you had mentioned earlier, the Cylon virus? It's fascinating because it emanates from this ancient beacon, which is left there by mysterious persons, which is kind of cool in and of itself. But talk to me a bit about getting off the planet and what you thought of that calamitous battle.
that space battle was probably it's probably one of the best space battles I've seen, particularly on television. Maybe the best, certainly the best on television. Yeah, when the Galactica jumps to the planets, right into the planet's atmosphere, was really striking. I was like, whoa, what a great idea. And did they borrow that for The Last Jedi, the light speed attack? Because obviously this was first. We're talking about this season, important to say, this season 2006 to 2007, and we're talking about a 2004 series. So, Ryan Johnson, did you borrow that? I like the light speed attack. I thought it was a really beautiful anime-esque attack. I know a lot of people, including Kyle, have a problem with the science behind it.
Well, not even the science. It breaks Star Wars for me.
It breaks the Star Wars philosophy of, why can't you just always do that?
Yeah, just make a bunch of ships in a foundry, in a shipyard somewhere, stack a bunch of droids in them, and just fucking punch them in the ships.
But I did think of that. I said, wow, I think they borrowed this from Battlestar. So Battlestar Galactica, dating back to the late 70s, always talking about in the other way, like how much did Battlestar borrow from Star Wars? Now we get to reverse the conversation a little bit. But great space battle. And that was really striking. That was a visual feast. And they didn't really do a lot with the space stuff. Of course, later on with Kara's death, and you get a little bit more space stuff. But that was the really dynamic sort of set piece space battle for the whole season. Happened very early. And I love the whole thing with the Cylon virus and sort of the human struggle with questioning how righteous it would be to attack using biological weapons when, basically hitting them when they're down, and how the humans are like, Adama was like, I don't know about that. It doesn't seem right. Again, sort of like imbuing that conflict with this gray area where it's like, whoa, like it really makes it believable. Like they're struggling, even though they know this race of Cylons is out for their destruction. They're still asking the question of like, should we do this? Do we attack the enemy camp while they're asleep? That type of thing. It's like the rules of war playing into a science fiction story. It was really, really cool. I really dug all that. It was really neat.
Yeah, I find that frustrating, especially as it plays out with Hilo, which is a character I really like, but Hilo is always the conscience. Like Hilo is always the good angel on everyone's shoulder, maybe to a fault since the very beginning. I mean, he's the one who trusted Sharon and all this weird shit.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
But it's fascinating that they have this problem. And I think I relate in some way to the more brutalist qualities of the president, where it's like, what are you talking about? We should murder all of them if we can. It doesn't matter. Like they obliterated our civilization. We're done, right? We're now seeking some planet that probably most of us don't even think really exists. And we're talking about whether we want to fight them back or something like that. It's like, there's no moral question here at all in my mind. Like there's no ethical question. They're not even, and this is the thing. And this is the thing I know the humans struggle with is they're not humans. They're not human. They're not human. Right. There's that awesome scene where you're reminded of it, where Ty punches Six in the face in the jail cell. And I love that scene. And then she just looks at him and punches him right back in the face. And it just reminds you, like, they're not human.
Right.
We're reminded of that when we're reminded, of course, during the trial that the president is cured by Baltar injecting her with Hera's blood.
Yeah.
It's not much of a question. I think you probably want to keep some of them dead, or like some of their blood and stuff, and play with it and, you know, explore it or whatever. But that beacon was there for a reason. If you believe in the mysticism of Battlestar Galactica, you have to assume that they encountered that after a jump for a reason, and that the Cylons went and discovered this beacon that ended up almost wiping them out. So it's frustrating to me, because it's like you had them,
right,
and you should have done it.
Right.
There's no question that you should have done that, and that's a little frustrating to me as well. But as we say, they sacrifice the Pegasus and all of that. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this random episode where we're introduced to Bulldog, the pilot. This is a fascinating episode.
It really is.
And it's the first time that we realize that the Admiralty knows more about what was happening in that armistice period than meets the eye, and that it's suggested, although not confirmed, that maybe they were trying to goad the Cylons into attacking them to begin with. And it's an idea that they play with, because there's this red line that's created in whatever armistice they sign with the Cylons. And it's so fascinating to think that they sign it's not a peace treaty, but they have this agreement with the machines. And this is when they're still machines. Right. So it's fascinating to think about it. They're still metallic toaster machines. And they sign this armistice, as we see, learn about in the very first episode of the show, and they disappear beyond the red line. And we discover here a pilot named Bulldog who escapes a vessel, a base star, in a stolen raider, and finds his way to the ship. And what you learn about this guy is that he was captured and abandoned captured by the Cylons before the war, and abandoned to his fate. And we learn a little bit about this Battlestar called Valkyrie that actually crosses the red line and tries to rescue, and the Black Ops mission goes wrong. And there's a question, although I don't know if you interpret it, Dig, as fulfilled, that this might have truly goaded the Cylons into attacking, possibly. Or we already know 6, for instance, is on Caprica by this point. The plan might already be in motion. Right. We know that the humans were not abiding by the rules of the armistice. So what did you make of that whole arc? I thought that was fascinating, and I wish that they integrated Bulldog more into the show beyond that point, because he's kind of good things kind of work out a little bit for him at the end.
Right.
And it would have been cool to see him with the Viper pilots, with Hot Dog and everyone else. But what do you make of this character? What did you make of this episode? I feel like this is one of the more likable episodes of the season.
Yeah, it was cool. It was really interesting, and it was a really defining, the whole situation, besides meeting the Bulldog character, is a really defining character for the remaining humans, for the Resistance, and for Admiral Adama. That you really see that gray area that exists, and the fact of fighting this war where they're completely, really, the humans are completely outclassed, right? That they have to get down with some really scrappy methods in order to win little battles, eventually hoping to win the war, but by having these little victories, building on these little victories by doing these really shady things. It was a heartbreaking arc, because when you meet this Bulldog character, he's like an old vet. He's a part of the fleet, but then when he finds out what happened, that he was basically put out there as a decoy, in not so many words, in this operation, and treated as as cannon fodder, so they could, conduct this tactic, which was really a crazy thing. And it really it ends well, but you could see why he wouldn't stick around. It'd be an interesting thing where it would be you're going to go back into another Viper, even though you were kind of thrown to the dogs already. It was great. It was one of those bottle episodes that was, again, really cleverly functions as something that really fleshes out some of the characters and the overall conflict behind the series, which was really kind of a neat way to do it. A really nice kind of way to tell a story, by showing and not telling, which I think the series did a good job this season with, where they, again, fleshing out the characters via fleshing out the story, fleshing out the origins and the history, which this one did, and this specific episode did, and just saying like that the humans they're just as much to blame in some capacity as the Cylons in this case, where obviously the Cylons started it, but the humans are gonna resort to whatever they need to resort to in order to not get destroyed, if not win.
Right. All right, Dake. We're at the point now where I want to ask you about some of these, what you call bottle episodes that we encounter, I think, one after the other. That's one of them too. But episode 9 is the boxing episode. Episode 10 is like with the poison algae.
Sure.
And all the rest. So these are episodes that kind of halt things, but there is some, in my opinion, but there are some interesting things that happen here. I particularly like that the Deanna character, they're playing around with the Deanna character and suicide. And I really I was curious to know what you thought about this particular choice, because I love that we learn, I think through, might be Cavill, one of the Cavils says that it's getting more and more painful. It's getting harder to revive ourselves in the resurrection ship. And it's becoming scarier and like whatever, like it's not going the way that they thought it was going to go as they die over and over again. But Deanna keeps killing herself on purpose to resurrect and to experience this interstitial space between life and death that they've discovered as Cylons. And this is what I've been trying to tell people as I try to get people to appreciate this show more, is that it's not really a science fiction show. It's a show with a science fiction setting, but it is a show about religion and philosophy.
Yeah. Right. Good
and
point.
It, like straight up.
Yeah.
And the trappings of what's happening don't really matter. You could imagine that it would be similar if it was like a primitive race on a planet getting chased by a more technologically advanced race into the mountains, and they fight this last campaign. It's just that like it's space. And I like that before they put Deanna into cold storage, they basically decide to just put her away. We learn that we know that there are 12 Cylon models, and that there at this point with Deanna, we learn that there are 5 that we're going to learn about. We learn about 4 of them by the end of the season.
Oh, yes.
But what did you make of that whole arc about how she's intentionally killing herself, that she literally disappears? Everyone's like, where the fuck are you? And she's literally finding different ways to kill herself so she can resurrect and come back and resurrect and come back and have this unintentional philosophical and religious connection to this gray space in between life and death that the Cylons had never intended to explore.
Right.
And how they can no longer trust her because she's so obsessed with this forbidden knowledge that is not embedded in them.
Yeah, she kind of becomes single-minded, and then they, eventually, because of this, is the reason why they have to take her out and kind of put her out of her own misery. But yeah, she becomes almost obsessed. It almost becomes like some sort of, rapturous moment for her. And it really draws up the point of how similar the humans are, or the Cylons are, to the humans, that they kind of get transfixed by the same things, not just with religion, but with the mysteries of religion and discovery, finding things out, that gray area between life and death. And it had me wondering whether that was going to be a thing, or whether that was going to be a thing that actually set the Cylons apart, that there's this in-between world that they could then access. I thought that's where we were kind of going with that. Like, it was going to be some sort of thing that they could use in order for, again, to, put forth their own ends, or, something that they could access in order to achieve victory over the humans or something. I thought that's where that was going, but it was really neat. I really liked the Lucy Lawless character and, the Deanna character, and where she seemed a lot different than the other Cylons. She seemed a little more multidimensional, or a little deeper than the other ones. Even the Six character. So that was a really interesting bit of writing, or an idea that they got in there that, again, harkens back to that whole religious thing where it's like the monotheistic versus the polytheistic or multitheistic thing, where it's like, even though they have those religious differences, the two factions have those religious differences, how similar they are, And, I wondered with the Deanna thing too, like, initially, was that some form of not hopelessness, but some form of questioning how righteous the Cylon mission was too? And in fact, of like, she seemed really gung-ho for the whole Eye of Jupiter thing and that whole crusade to, beat the humans there, to the planet, to the shrine and all that kind of stuff. And then she took that turn. So it was like how she seemed even a little more human than the other Cylons, who sometimes seem very human themselves. So that was interesting. And I'm looking forward to seeing where, if they continue anything with that, not with that character, but that arc.
It's cool too that Sharon plays around with suicide as well to infiltrate the planet, because the Centurions and whatever they can't figure out who's who. Like, it's a Sharon, it's a Six or whatever.
Right.
They don't have any idea. So they were able to take advantage of that too, I think, for some clever writing. You had brought up the Eye of Jupiter, and this is the painting, basically. Now, this is where things get really mystical, and I'm curious about what you think of. And we have to jump a little bit forward to answer this question about Starbuck, but the question remains, is Starbuck some sort of biblical character in this? Like, she specifically is a biblical character, very similar to the president, where she plays a role, like not just an amorphous movement to find Earth, but she is at the center of it. Remember, of course, she returns to Caprica to get the arrow that points to the planetarium that allows them to see what the sky, which I think is one of the coolest parts of the show, when they're standing in this, like, in this planetarium, and they look up and it's what the stars look like from Earth's surface, which I think is
cool,
fucking dope. So then they can start triangulating things. They find like a nebula. That's where they're going towards by the end of the season. But I love that they have this painting in her apartment from the very beginning of the show, when you see her space on Caprica, like her apartment, and they have this huge painting, and then the paintings found in various places. And I like that the chief gets involved here because he comes from a priestly family, so he has some understanding. And I also love the biblical nature. Like, it's clear that something is happening to everyone in the story, I think, when the Cylons and the humans converge at this place to find the Eye of Jupiter, or what it means, to point to the next clue. And they're there to witness a nova at the time that it's happening. Which happens after many billions of years to a typical star.
And it was prophesized, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so they're seeing it all. And it gives me goosebumps almost, because it's so good. Not because the story itself is good, but because it's so exciting to think about a person in this unusual situation, let's say, where they're like, holy shit, it's actually like everything is actually happening. Like, even the non-believers, the skeptics, must not be skeptical when time and time again they survive based on the injection of certain people into the situation over and over and over again. So what did you think about the Eye of Jupiter? You had brought it up earlier about Chief kind of figuring this out, along with Starbuck having kind of painted this vision that people are sharing. And I don't know, I'm curious what you think about this kind of existential crisis they're in. Yeah.
It was chilling. How did we humans end up in the same place with our arch enemy at the same time, at this prophesized event as it was written, this star's supernova? We only have once that happens, I think it's Gaeta, right? He's like, once that happens, we'll have minutes to get out of there. Once we see the anomaly or the light, we'll have minutes to escape. So there's that danger, which was really cool, like little action set piece thing. But it was really neat. And yeah, really mysterious how you start to see that there's more to this pain in the ass hotshot pilot character, the Starbuck character, with the Eye of Jupiter, and how it dates back to her childhood, how she used to draw it when she was a kid, and the painting of it on the wall. And not only dating back to her childhood, but also had me questioning too, like, wow, like what's going on with Starbuck? Not only in questioning who the final Cylon is, I have no idea, completely unspoiled. You'll
Excellent.
thank you very much. But
It's a rarity.
also, like, how much of her skit, like it got me thinking, like, wow, like, so she's not just this human, like, non-Jedi wedge, like, super talented pilot, like, she's actually superhuman in some way. So now it's got me thinking about all these different things, got all my wires crossed. But it was so neat. Like, I love the whole thing with the prophecy. Not only that, but the visual effects for the supernova. I thought they did an awesome job. That's one thing with this season, too. You go back to 2004 with season 1, and then you look at season 3, like, all those space exterior shots of the fleet, the Battlestar Galactica, the supernova, all the effects stuff, the dogfighting. It was super. Like, you could see how much it evolved in just a few years, which was really kind of a nice little visual feast.
Money and popularity, I think, change a lot of.
Good point.
A lot of things.
Get a little more in that bank. Get a little better visual effects. But that was really cool. And, I love everything. And there's with this season, you could get caught up in the eye candy and sort of the set piece action and all that kind of stuff. But there's always a deeper meaning. To your point, there's always a deeper meaning going on, drawing back to not just actual human society, but, like you say, religion and its place in the story and how it really reflects real life, which is, it's worth watching again. I think I haven't rewatched any season yet, but I think that's a big part of rewatching it, is just to get that depth, because it's in there.
It definitely is. I recommend, because I think this is the third time I'm watching it all the way through. I watched it in scattered things when I was on and stuff too.
That's impressive.
Give it time, like, and go back to it. I think you're gonna, because I almost forgot, like, some of the stuff. I'm like, what happens to this? And what you kind of, like, remember. I'm like, yeah, I know who the 4 Cylons are. Like, I've known the whole time that are
right. But you still,
like, you still don't, right? You still don't remember all of the ins and outs of it. So it's fun to go back to in that regard as well.
Sure.
So we talk about this biblical timing. By the way, so this is when Deanna is being decommissioned, and she has an amazing quote that I wrote down, and it's right before she's boxed, and she says, "It's no flaw to wonder about your purpose." And I was like, this is a great line. And the Cylons now disappear for a little while. So we're left to get back into what's going on with the humans for the most part. And we explore some interesting things. There's the whole Dr. Roberts Sagittarian episode, which I think is a total waste of time.
Yeah, you didn't think, what did you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, do you disagree? I don't know, like, I think it was like a commentary on Christian Science or something. And I was saying Jehovah's Witness or something. I don't know, but they're really only about blood transfusions. But yeah, it was weird because, like, we learned more about some of these planets, but I just thought, I was like, that was another episode where I'm like, why do what is this episode? Did you feel differently about it?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, it was probably a good reminder that, the humans come from these 12 colonies based on whatever, our actual constellations or whatever. And, that they're different colonies. There was a class system. Some of them were blue collar and frowned down upon. Some of them, like, I guess some of them were like certain types of people. It seemed like all the officers came from the higher end colonies, and the lower end colonies that were like, the laborers and the farmers and stuff were kind of frowned upon, and how there was a racism, against certain colonies, and how certain characters, like they say D came from Sagittarian, even though that was a lower end, lower class colony, that she ascended up into, like, the higher ranks of being an officer and stuff, despite her background, but that there's, like, these inherent biases. So if anything, it was just a good reminder for that, because I certainly wasn't. I certainly forget that, even though there's these colonists that are looking for this 13th colony. It was just a nice reminder of, like, the setup of the show and where the people initially came from, I guess.
All right, let's go to this episode about Bill Adama. Nice backstory into his life, the decay of his marriage.
Oh, yeah.
What did you make of all of that? It added, I think, a lot of tragedy to that character, because you realize that he wasn't in a loving situation. It was a one-way relationship, and it's something even his own son observed. And it's difficult because you love this character and you don't at least I do. Um, we just feel as if, I think, I don't want to say we. I feel as if you want to treat this character with kid gloves because he's been through so much, and you can see it on his face, and he's got this contentious relationship with his kid. He lost another son.
Yeah, right.
And he lost his marriage, and he's in this unusual situation, and he's our hero. He's our consummate hero, and he's our consummate staid professional. And to see him in vulnerable moments, I think, is difficult, even though it matures the courtship between him and Rosalind, which I think is awesome. And I love that aspect of it. It's just hard to know that he carries so much pain. And I'm wondering what you make of that.
I wonder if they did that because it sort of clears the path for a would-be romance between Rosalind and Adama and the Admiral. You know, does that clear the way for, you know, like an, you know, something where the Admiral and Madam President could have a relationship without the baggage of his past. We know he's a widower. We know his wife's passed. So it makes it acceptable for such a heroic, consummate good guy character. We know he's the epitome of a selfless leader. He's completely unselfish. Like you say, he's completely lovable. You're always backing him. You see what a hero he is. And like you said, we know the tragedy of his life. He already lost a son. Obviously, he's a widower. So now to go in and find out that his wife never really loved him, not only that, but his younger son knows it as well. He's like, Mom never loved you. It's really harsh.
Yeah.
But, you know, you could see, like, yeah, like the wrinkles and the creases in this guy's face, the furrowed brow. Like, this guy's had a tough life. And the fact that he could still be this hero and still lead the humans to a brighter day and do that in such a seemingly unselfish way, I think it does. I think it probably clears the way a little bit for him to be able to go ahead with a new romance and know that, like, we know, I guess it's just nice in fiction to know, like, it's okay for him not to think about his old wife because his old wife was kind of a bitch, you know, essentially.
Yeah.
And, you know, was kind of mean, you know, kind of like not a nice person, and made that unrequited love real, even when she was alive, even when they were together, you know? So it really did. I mean, it adds insult to injury. Poor Admiral Adama, you know. But it was one of those really humanizing arcs where, and kind of cool that the show's not afraid to go there, you know, to take that tragedy even further, which not only makes you root for him more, and now you're really rooting for that relationship to bear fruit, you know, between Madam President and Adama. Like, all right, like, yeah, we're ready to see that now. We know we don't have to worry about the ex-wife anymore, so let's do it.
Right. It's true. It's like, it was like the necessary literal exposition we needed for him to get over it, to get beyond that, especially because he asks about her several times.
But it's so sweet that he brings out her picture and talks to it like only on his anniversary.
Yeah.
It's like his cathartic way of dealing with the whole thing. And the fact that it's very Admiral Adama-ish, right? That he still keeps her in his heart because he loved her, even though that love wasn't returned. Very tragic, very cool. Something really unexpected to see in a sci-fi series. So again, like, makes it, you know, grounds it with those human emotions. That's the important part of this series. It's not the spaceships, all the cool stuff going on. It's the people.
Yes, I agree 100%. We also get a lot into kind of class conflict and the haves and the have-nots. And it's interesting because Baltar is kind of trying to take advantage of this situation with his own manifesto. But we see back on New Caprica that there's an emergence of a labor union, the Colonial Workers Alliance. And it seems like it's the people that would be called in this show the knuckle draggers, that on the various ships, the more mechanical, let's say blue collar people together. Sure. But we learn a little bit more about their plight through the Tillium ship and the strike of the Tillium ship and how Chief gets involved in that, which I think is really cool. But it brings up this existential question. And I think this is where governmental systems and economic systems come back into play, and why why I think the one unrealistic aspect of Battlestar Galactica, well, there's, I'm sure, many, but is just this adherence to the rule of law. Like, I just don't think that would happen in this situation. And in fact, I don't think that you could even expect that it would be possible in this situation. I do think that authoritarianism would rule the day, and that isn't good, but it's understandable that a strong man would, or a woman would come to, a Mussolini type character would come to bear. And I mean, that's the way it would be. But nonetheless, they deal with these kind of tangential issues. And I think one of them is class, but moreover, what would happen to people in these situations when they are where they are, they're put where they're put. And it's interesting. It's through a kid who got his name pulled to go to the Tillium ship to help them work there, who basically just like interned at a farm for a month. And so he has some sort of, experience with heavy machinery, but then he ends up getting tragically hurt or whatever. And it just asks this question of, well, why are we just stuck in these situations? It's kind of not fair. And I think that it's an interesting and understandable quandary that the show absolutely needed to explore, and I think could even have explored far more. So what did you make of that particular focus on class conflict?
Yeah, that was a really cool thing, like that they have this cold and calculated, sort of thoughtless, unfeeling system for putting people in boxes. That was a really striking moment, although it's such a small moment in the series. It's like that kid's like, I'm not a farmer. And he's trying to explain himself, and they're just like, whatever, you're a farmer. You know what I mean? Like, says here you're a farmer. Like, and he's like, no, dude, like I did this for a summer. Like, I'm not a farmer. I don't, so like the way that people are processed and put in boxes without really exploring who they are, digging deeper, like, just, again, it speaks to real life, things that we can relate to, things that we've gone through or loved ones have gone through. I love that. And, again, in continuing that class system thing and that reminder of, like, even though there's this common enemy, there's still these internal biases going on. We saw that again with the doctor episode, and that people from he was trying to basically kill people from different colonies, or, saving the vaccines or the medicines for people who he deemed more worthy, you know, that stuff's still going on in wartime. You know what I mean? It's a very human, real life, realistic thing, thing that goes on. If let's say we were fighting a war with China, right? God forbid that ever happens. But let's say we were fighting a war with China, the United States, the West, and Western allies, whatever you want to call them. Does that mean everybody in the United States' internal biases and prejudices are just going to go away? No, it's still going to be here. Tragically, sucks, but that's just the way it is.
Right.
So, it's really cool and calculated that the series puts those things in and really makes us, again, it draws us in, because like we're fighting these metal robots and we're running from space and we keep jumping at light speed to get away from them. And it seems like a fantastic scenario. But then when you ground it with this kind of shit, you could really put yourself in that position. Whether you're one of the good guys or one of the bad guys, whether you're the evil doctor or you're Hilo saying this guy's a bastard. It was Hilo, right? It was Hilo calling him that. Was it Hilo? Yeah. So, you know what I mean? Like, no matter what part you play, you could see yourself in that scenario. It really is one of those things where you could put yourself in that situation and say, how would I do this? How would I conduct myself in this situation? Which is something that I'm really falling in love with about this series. And, I was unfairly misjudging it at the beginning of the series. I think it really it got super good, man, towards the end. To the middle to the end, it was like, wow, like it really had me. Probably for the last 10 episodes, I would say.
What did you, before we get into the tribunal, because we can wrap up with that. That's such a huge, that's a huge story. But we see at the very end of the show that Starbuck returns. I'm just curious what you thought about her death and what you think about her return. Did you think she was dead? And
I did.
Yeah. And what did you make of her returning? And what do you think that says about her character? I mean, obviously she's supernatural in some way.
Yeah, I have no idea. You don't even really know at first if Lee's dreaming or what, because he's been going through some, moral and mental quandaries himself towards the end of the season. So you don't really know what's going on with that character too. Yeah, and they allude to it, or they foreshadow. So, she basically crashes into another ship and then returns on like fumes to the bay of the Galactica. So there's a whole thing leading up to, she was interesting for me this season because I felt like 3/4 of the way in, probably, it was just like, all right, it's Starbuck. She's still a pain in the ass. She's still unnecessarily angsty. That's how it felt to me. And I was like, all right, I see all these other arcs. You're introducing all these other characters. You're giving us more depth with this other giant cast, almost everybody. But Starbuck just seems the same. And there seems no reason for it, until they get to the arc, not only with the Eye of Jupiter and sort of her history, which seems a little bit hearkening to something religious or supernatural or, otherworldly or whatever, but her history of abuse with her mom, that she was physically abused and mentally abused as a kid, which now you're starting to see, okay, now the angst and the rapid, constant fighting and lashing out and getting written up and getting disciplinary actions and all that kind of stuff. Now it's all making sense. The whole Maverick thing is starting to make sense. But, it was 3/4 into the episode. But I knew they really, again, they hinted at it because they started to play up out of the blue again. They needed to do this, the father-daughter relationship between Admiral and Kara started to get played up again. I was like, all right, something's going to happen here. And since they already did that with Adama going from season 1 into season 2, I knew it had to be something with Starbuck. Something was going to happen. There was going to be some sort of emotional occurrence. And it is very emotional when she dies. Like, just seeing it, forget Lee, just seeing it through Admiral Adama's eyes was really heartbreaking. That was crushing. Apparently, unfortunately, they waited a little too long. They should have hinted at that relationship in order to draw out the emotion throughout the season from early on, because it would have played up, the father-daughter emotion and the loss. It would have played up the loss. But with the Kara character, the ending, I feel like they shouldn't have done it. I don't know. I feel like there was enough at the end with, again, we'll go into the trial, the Gaius trial, but I feel like ending it on that note with the drama between Lee and Madam President and Admiral Adama, with Lee sort of being pulled between two different careers. Is he going to follow his grandfather into law, or is he going to go back and be a CAG? Not only that, but the hard feelings, that are sort of festered between the president and Adama and Lee. But also the fact of Gaius getting off, spoilers, and the fact that even though he got off, the tragedy is that he's going to have to reintegrate himself into society. And how the hell is this guy going to do that where 2/3 of the population want him dead? I thought that was enough to end on. So seeing the Kara thing, I don't know. I guess they wanted a proper cliffhanger like they had done the first 2 seasons. But I'm not sure how necessary it was. And it was also a little strange, a little creepy, because you don't really know what's going on there. And the fact of she's saying, I guess I understand, because she's saying she found Earth and she knows the way and everything's going to be okay. And Lee's like, what? Lee's just, it's 30 seconds of the ending and Lee thought she was dead. So it's like, what the hell is going on here? Sure. What did you think? What did you think of the ending? Now, you know where it's going. We're not going to talk about that
vaguely.
Yet,
I mean, it's like hard to even remember a lot.
Remember?
Like a lot of it. I mean, I remember the very end, but we're getting close. I mean, they show Earth at the end of the season, and I think what's important to the lore is that they're showing Earth the way it looks pretty recently. Right?
Yes.
I mean, Pangea, like even when it's like the dinosaurs roam the Earth, like the Earth didn't look like this.
That's
like,
a great point.
Now. So you're seeing a kind of modern looking Earth.
Yeah.
That's an important clue.
See North America, Florida.
Right. Florida prominently. Right. Exactly. And we're close. Like they show where they are in relation to our system and our star, and they're getting close. So that's exciting. I love her coming back because I feel bad because I was watching it with Micah and I said something to her in the first season where I'm like, they'll never kill her or something like that. Right. And then I kind of had forgotten that happened. And so when it happened, I think I kind of like ruined that arc for her. I'm like, they're never going to kill Starbuck. But I totally forgot that they did. And so when that happened, I was like, oh, sorry. But I dig it. I agree with you that we have a lot of threads. The Cylons are off doing something and tracking their jumps. They were tracking them through the Tilium ship, which was interesting. And we have, like you said, Baltar, who we have to discuss still, off to find his people. And he's whisked away by some ladies to go live his life, as we'll see. And then we have the president. And then we have what's going on the ship, of course. And then we have two other hanging threads that we have to talk about.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the tribunal, but we'll end with that. I want to talk about the four Cylons we learn about.
Sure. Of course. Crazy was this?
I love that. Yeah, I agree. I love the music angle that they hear this song. It's like a song from childhood, I think, is the way. I think it might have been Anders describes it like that. And it's, on one hand, I remember being like, oh man, that sucks. Well, what? But excuse me, sneeze. But I think that, thank you. But I think that it's fun to think about the possibilities about, well, as you said earlier, these people remaining in their posts, and we see them return, in fact, to their posts. Fascinating. You see Ty return to the bridge. You see Tory return to the right hand of, Billy's spot, as I like to call it, the right hand of the president.
That is Billy's spot. Forever Billy's spot.
But what I thought was interesting, Dagan, I don't know if you read into this at all, was that the four of them are kind of key characters in terms of their importance to the survival of the human race. And you have Chief Tyrrell, who's in charge of the deck and repairs. You have Tory, who has the ear of the president. You have Ty, who's the XO of the ship. So, and then of course you have Anders, and I think he's the most interesting one because of his relationship to Kara, which is really important. Even though you see it, Felix and others trying to throw themselves at him, he's still really hung up on her. But also makes you wonder, how did they survive on Caprica? Oh, yeah, because they weren't trying to kill him necessarily. And it brings a lot more.
Dude, I didn't even think of that.
It brings a lot more into focus.
Holy shit.
So what did you make of the four Cylons and discovering some of these key characters are mechanical machines, have implanted memories, and makes you wonder about the stories they tell and the memories they have? And like we said, like, Chief has a priestly background with his family, but does he?
Right.
Tory particularly just kind of comes out of nowhere, and we all kind of acknowledge that, and that makes a lot of sense. Anders survives and finds his way to the fleet. These are all, again, biblical style things. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, you're right. When you think about their histories and their origins and how they're integrated into the story, there's a lot to think about there. I thought they did a really great job with taking four seemingly disparate characters that are don't really deal with each other too much. Now, Sam and Tory form a relationship much later in like episodes 19 and 20. But for the most part, those are characters that are relatively detached from each other. And the fact that they're all Cylons is a great way to throw off the scent. Even in thinking about it now, or without rewatching the season yet, you could see they foreshadowed the shit out of it. But, which is really cool, because it was still a shock to me. And I'm wondering now, episode 18, 19, and 20, as we're wrapping up this season, is there even going to be a reveal? Are we going to find out anymore? And who are they going to be? We find out earlier in the season that Gaius isn't one, or supposedly isn't one. So we could tick that off the list. But I love this reveal, man. It gives you so much food for thought, And again, at the end, that's why I say, like, the Kara thing, could they, her coming back, the Starbuck thing, could they had her a reveal that she was alive? Could that come later? Because we also find out about Laura's cancer returning. So there's really a lot to think about going into season 4 already.
Definitely.
But these Cylon reveals, man, was really a shock. And I love seeing it. It's the first time, again, we talked about it a little earlier in the episode, but I love seeing their reactions to it. Like, no, this isn't happening. And how it's dawning on them, and how they're kind of doubling down on, like, no, like, fuck it. Like, I'm the colonel. I'm the XO of this ship. I'm this. No, I'm chief. I'm in charge of, the aircraft. I'm the right hand to the president. Whatever it is, like, they're doubling down on, like, they're terrified, basically. They're terrified. And then they have to sort of keep it. It seems like they're kind of with a wink and a nod going to keep it to themselves, to the four of them, and just kind of reintegrate themselves into their positions. It's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. And of course, you know the answer to this, but of course, I'm left guessing who's the final of the 12 Cylons. Who's going to be the one? You know, is it going to be Starbuck? Is it going to be Madam President? Is it going to be Lee? I don't think it's going to be Lee. Is it going to be the Admiral? Who, you know, Hilo? Who knows? Like, who? It's like, what? Those are too obvious, though. Like, and then I'm trying to dig deeper. Like, you know, so I'm already going there. You know, I'm already looking for the next bit. I'm already looking for the next reveal. So it's exciting.
Yeah, definitely.
I love this. And especially with Colonel Ty, who would have thought? You know, who would have possibly thought that was going to be the case? And the fact that he's revealed last two of the four was really cool.
I've been trying to
when he walks into that room. It's like,
I love it too. You know, walk there. I've been trying to do my impression because that guy is just so great. Like,
he's so good. Dude.
You know, I like, you know,
the courtroom scene. He just brings it to another. Everybody does in episode 19, but like, yeah, the acting in that episode, it just reminds you. We talk about this a lot on the show, especially with sci-fi and things that are more outlandish. But like the fact that they could get this cast to just to a person to like really like give such grounded, nuanced, and realistic human portrayals of these characters. Like they all get it so much to a person. Like there's no one that even outside of that, you know, no one is there's not one person that's kind of like taking you out of it. You know, it's everybody. They're all 100%.
Sure.
The performances. It's really special. You don't see that a lot. You know?
I agree. I really think that the ensemble cast is pretty underrated.
They're good, man.
Yep, I agree. Well, we keep referencing the Tribunal, and we should obviously talk about this. This arc in the last two episodes is great, as you said, and really powerful, particularly Lee's diatribe at the end of it, which I think really restructures the entire show and reminds you about the non-binary, but in fact deeply gray morality that everyone is operating under. And I loved it. And I forgot about it in the moment to moment. I know that Baltar gets off. I remembered that Adama is the deciding vote that gets him off, and that you know, wedges a little bit between he and the president. But Lee says, we are not a civilization anymore. We're a gang. And that really resonated with me because it's true. Like, we're not a civilization anymore. We're pretending we have our flags and we have our fucking stenographer. I thought that was kind of weird. Like, right. And they're trying to judge all of these things. Like, but President Roslin issued a blanket pardon. Ty murdered many people. Lee Adama blew up a ship and killed 1,000 people, and all of these kinds of things. And even though we're engineered to hate Baltar, great character, great acting, but a really loathsome character, especially after he gets off and just goes right back to the way he was.
Oh, dude, it's amazing.
Which is awesome. I really loved it. But we're taught to hate him and want the worst for him, but you can't circumnavigate the logic that Lee places on the situation. And that two people still vote, by the way, to want to execute him after that, I thought was again a real sign of fascistic society, which I think is again central to the themes, the governmental themes of the show. So there's a lot to say about this scene, or this ordeal, including Lampkin, who's a really cool character, the lawyer.
Oh, I love him. I love when he leaves and he's talking about how Lee is honest and he leaves the cane and just walks away or whatever. It's fucking great scene. Very, very subtle stuff like that. Talk to me a little bit about what your thoughts are on this. I don't know how they would reintroduce Lampkin going forward, but I really hope that's not the end of that character. I loved him. I really loved the performance. I loved the character. I loved the fact that he was like a protege of Grandpa Adama, you know, famous defense lawyer, and he was kind of like his underling, and that he learned from the Adama. It's like, I love the whole way they tied that in. It's so wonderful. And you're wondering, you know, it's building up to this trial. don't forget, Gaius Baltar betrayed the humans to the Cylons. He really, and everybody knows it, but they're still giving him this fair shake. They're still giving him this fair trial, and you're wondering how it's going to go because everybody, including those judges up there, Adama and the other captains, have their internal biases. So you're really wondering how it's going to go. Lee is trying his hand at law. You got that whole angle. And Gaius is just the consummate bastard throughout the whole thing. And I love the fact that he gets off. There's a huge reveal, as you said, that Admiral Adama was the winning vote. He reveals that to Laura. And the irony, dude, of like the victory, the apparent victory, or the way he sees it, the way Gaius fancies it as a victory, but then realizing, oh shit, like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to live? How am I going to exist? I wish that it happened a little earlier in the season, only so you could see the way it would be for him before he's rescued by that shadowy faction, the woman with the picture of the sick kid or whatever, and he's whisked away for apparent, seeming protection. I wish that we got to see a little bit more of him being integrated, seeing how deadly it would be. Like, it would only be a matter of time, So it's justified that he's getting whisked away by people that want to protect him. But it would have been nice to see how it would have been for him for a spell first, at least as a cathartic thing for us, because he's such a shit.
Yeah,
the character's such a shit.
It totally is, and it's funny because they do kind of relieve that pressure quickly. And
they do.
We see with that Rogue 6, I think it's in season 2 with the nuclear warhead or whatever, that she's like kind of stowed away on a ship. So it's interesting that like people can disappear into the fleet, and we know that, which I find fascinating.
That's fascinating,
which is so cool. And this flotilla, basically, of ships, it's not like they're just coming and going; they're together, and yet there are stowaways and illegal things and all that. And we get a little bit of that.
And Cylons.
Right, and Cylons now we know as well. It's really, really interesting stuff. But I love Lee's speech at the end about forgiveness and vengeance, and he especially gets into the theme of shame. And I love that he says what I think is true, although it's difficult, which is that like we are, as a people, taking all of our shame and all of the sin that we have perpetrated during the Cylon occupation and all of the rest, and we're just putting it on this dude that we don't like, and we're going to shoot him out of an airlock, and nothing is going to change. And it's a difficult thing to hear. I think it's a little more straightforward than that, personally, but there's no denying that Lee makes the argument that if you think that this man is guilty for collaboration and all that, then there's just no way that these other people aren't. And it's a difficult but good point. You can even argue that the collaboration of Baltar with the Cylons is not even the worst thing that happened in that ordeal as far as deaths are concerned. Lee makes the argument that it might have actually saved everyone's lives. He also makes the argument that Baltar saved Laura, and didn't have to do that. It's the tethers and tendrils that they connect are really difficult. And I especially hate, although I love, but I hate as a viewer, the destruction of, or the seeming destruction of Lee's relationship with his dad.
Yes.
And that's tough.
Very sad.
That's tough. Yeah. But
that trial, very uncomfortable to watch because of that. You see, because of the personal feelings between the Admiral and his son, but also President Laura and Lee, the love and affection that they share, flying in the face of their politics and sort of their views on things, and how those two things are coming into conflict, and it's causing hard feelings, and you're seeing it happen during the trial. It's like really over, and it's over Gaius Baltar, and you're like, it's such a tragic thing to witness as a viewer. You're seeing the dismantling of those relationships and the betrayals and the hurt as a result of the betrayal. It's like, oh my God, it's just really good drama, man. It's as good as any drama I've ever seen in a television series.
Yeah,
it's really beautifully done. And, we didn't talk too much about that. towards the beginning of this season, that whole judge, jury, executioner faction, I think they were calling themselves the Circle, where they were taking it upon themselves to basically grill somebody. And then if they found them to be lying or wanting, they would shoot them out of the airlock. And, you know, Sam and I think Celix and Colonel Ty, like they were all part of that. You know, all these main characters are part of this thing that in their anger and in their vengeance and in their sort of lusting over some sort of revenge, were taking it upon themselves to do that. And then how that's echoed in the trial at the end, you know, as you say, as per Lee's sort of monologue at the end there. It was really, I mean, really strong stuff, and really nice the way they tied that bow and connected things from the beginning of the series to the end. Really deft writing and not that many holes. You know, again, I would have liked to see more from Zarek. I like the fact that Madam President makes him the vice president, and he seems like he's on the up and up, and he's actually a good guy, and their whole friendships are in the form, and then they sort of just drop that.
Yeah,
you know, they didn't.
Yeah.
But there was very few of those things. Very few of those things that were overlooked. Which, you know, again, all these characters, I would call that a success. You know,
no, definitely, I agree. What's interesting about Zarek too is that he's in a lot of the scenes. He's just not like he's in the background and all this. It's like he's
Dengar,
not up front. Right? Yeah, it's like why. Like, yeah, you want to see more of him, especially because he seems to be taking a good turn. But you haven't seen the last time, Zarek. I'm curious what you think. I'm curious what you think happens next as we wrap up this episode. What are you feeling is like? What do you think happens? Do you have any idea?
You know, the one thing that I'm really I love the character of Lee. I think I kind of fell in love with him last season, as I was saying in that episode, and I'm wondering. One thing I'm really wondering is what he, you know, you see him kind of pulled in both directions. They're kind of rallying to the hangar bay to get to the Vipers at the end there. And he's sort of like in his suit, but wanting to go run with them to the Vipers and stuff. So I want to see where Lee goes as a character and what he ends up doing and how his relationship with his dad and Laura progress, because I love those three characters so much. And of course, the whole thing with Starbuck, like I really have a lot of questions about that. Like, how are they gonna say that she survived? We saw her crash in a fiery wreck, right? And Lee was like, it was just fragments of the ship everywhere. She's dead. Like, there's no hope, type of thing. How are they gonna explain this without being cheesy, right? She's a main character, so our minds automatically go to her. And then how are things gonna... One thing that I realized, Kyle, I don't know if you realized this. I'm sure you saw it. There's that great CG pullout at the end. We see the two Vipers. We see Lee and Starbuck's Viper pull out. We see the Galactica pull out. We see 4 of the Cylon base ships following them. Now, last we heard, they thought they weren't being followed. So they pull out. We see the Cylon ships following them, and then we pull out to Earth. So there was a reveal that the Cylons are back on their ass at the end. They don't say anything. It's in the last seconds of the season, but it's there. So that's interesting that the Cylons haven't gone away. And knowing that there's only going to be one more season, right? It's like, I don't know. And how many episodes are in the last season?
20.
Okay, so it's a long run.
Yeah,
so
we have about a third of the way to go, I would say, something like that.
Yeah, that's a lot. You could do a lot in that amount of time. We saw that with season 3. They did a lot. So I don't know. I don't even know how to predict. And also, you're not only with Madam President's cancer, how is that going to justify itself? Is she going to go in for another shot? Is she going to actually pass? But how are these 4 Cylons, very important to the humans, very important to the cause, how are they going to integrate themselves? How is that going to play out? How are their relationships going to be with the Cylons that we know exist? Are we going to see them interfacing? You know, the existing Cylons, 6, number 1, number 2, all those guys. Are they going to be interfacing now with our Cylons? How is that going to go? You know, there's a lot. They do a good job with the cliffhangers. I will say that. There's plenty of tension going in.
Indeed.
I got to say, is season 4 on our docket? before January?
I'm looking at it now. The one you sent, it's not, but we can accelerate it and put it on the docket.
Yeah, we can always put it in there.
Yeah, whatever you want.
But I don't even want it. It's at the point now where it's like it's going to be pain. Oh, we're doing Razor though. We are doing Razor.
Yeah, we'll do Razor and and then we'll get to
I don't know if I can wait.
We don't have to wait. We can keep going. I'm happy
maybe
to
keep going. You know me. There's going to be that threat of spoiling. Which I haven't yet.
I'm looking at the schedule now. I'll rewrite this, like what your suggestions are, and we'll see what we can do to get it in here.
Yeah, maybe we'll get it in. Might as well, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. That was fun, dude. That was really
we'll get it in.
A lot of fun. Oh!
Yeah, I'm glad you had fun, man. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
It was a wild ride. At first I was rooting for like, all right, if this is bad, that's going to be a unique conversation for KnockBack. Dagan being negative about something, and then it'll be kind of fun. And Colin being up on something, and then we'll have that conflict, and it might be fun for a change. But I liked it. I also wonder, like, what was the needle drop rights for the Jimi Hendrix song for All Along the Watchtower? One of the great rock songs of all time.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm glad they used it. Did it take you out of the story a little bit? Like, all right, you have this classic piece of music from decades ago in real life. Like, did it integrate itself for you, or were you like, oh, I don't know?
Yeah, it was fine. It was fine. There's something else actually that bothers me even more in the season that I think you'll find funny. I think it was that's similar to that, which is I think it was with Adama's wife is smoking cigarettes, as I recall, in like her scenes, and they are Marlboros. They're Marlboros. They zoom in on them like in the ashtray, and it's just like MAR, and then like, and I'm like, they're fucking Marlboro cigarettes.
They made it. Marlboro made it all the way to the future.
Yeah, exactly. From the past,
despite all the no smoking stuff over the last 2 decades.
It's amazing. Yeah, Doc Cottle doesn't care. Why would anyone else care on this?
That's true.
They have Cylons. They just inject themselves with Cylon blood. They'll be fun.
Shout out to that guy too.
Oh, he's
not in it a lot, but the episode, when he shows up, I think you were saying it in an earlier episode. He's just good.
Yeah, he's great.
Super good. You buy it. He just seems like a real character.
No, totally.
Like a chain smoking doctor.
Yeah, and he's always like, I got another patient.
With maybe not the best bedside manner, but
no, definitely not. But that's what makes him so funny.
Yeah, he's great.
I think he's great too. And I like that they've kept, like, even though they made him into kind of like the character Kelly, they made him into he's in the very beginning of the show, and like he just pops up every once in a while. I like how there's like some continuity. It's not quite as intricate as I would have liked it. I really like the idea of shows having the same extras, and like people you maybe never meet, never see, never talk to, but they're just the same. And I feel like there are a lot of faces, which is cool, but it would be cool to see that meta level of continuity.
That's a great point. Do they do that with like the press corps in this? I never pay attention. Like the 20 people sitting in those press junkets with the president.
Yeah, like some of them are the same. There's like the redhead and all of that. That's like always the same, but that would
be cool if they paid attention to that sort of detail.
Yeah, I agree.
I
agree.
Yeah.
Well, Dig, that's Battlestar Galactica season 3. It's available on Peacock. Yeah, I'm glad that you enjoyed it. I'm really happy to hear that. And
it ended so strong that it just makes you forget about all the inherent problems. If I watch it again, I'd be like probably lamenting like certain choices. Oh, that's getting a little bit. But what do you think about my point about the levity? There really is none.
No, it's very dark.
You don't see that a lot. Even take a series like, well, I think Vince Gilligan is super good at this, but like Breaking Bad, The Gravity, right? Better Call Saul, The Wire, certainly Game of Thrones has this, The Sopranos, like they're very good. The showrunners are very good at incorporating comedy or moments of lightness into like murder and drug dealing and all these horrific things, accidents and all these horrific things happening. And I think this series got really carried away with itself in season 3. Now it's awesome. It's brilliantly written. You have some really core, great ideas at the center of it, and the performances just carry it to the next level. So the performances may even rescue it. But what do you think of that? Like, could they incorporate a little more levity in there just to make it a little more, you think about all these good cinematic works of art, they have that, and this doesn't.
I think you're right. Well, just in saying that, this situation would probably be very funny to be in because it is so hopeless and dark and death is around every corner.
Good
that
point.
How can you not laugh in that situation?
Yeah,
I would
right.
imagine that it would probably be a pretty funny situation. And I'm not saying funny like you're fucking glad to be there. I'm saying it's not serious, like
Right.
in the moment to moment, because you just don't know when you're gonna get blasted out of a fucking hull breach or something like that. And that's the reality they live in. So I agree with you because you brought up Game of Thrones, and there are scenes in that I remember that are like awesome, funny
they're
scenes.
so funny.
There's that scene when the dude is trying to do like the Viking funeral with the arrow, the flaming arrow, and he like can't hit the ship. That's like a really great scene. And the guy just like fucking takes the bow and arrow and shoots it and like hits the boat. It's an awesome scene.
That's good shit.
And I remember and what's funny is that it kind of it imitates life in the sense that I remember seeing that scene for the first time and being like, oh, I would probably miss once. And then watching him like miss a few times was like really funny. Like life, again, a life imitates art kind of thing. So
absolutely.
I agree that I think that now maybe that humor is happening on the other ships where they're not fighting for their lives on a fucking constant basis.
There you go. And it's a tone. They decided on that tone, like Game of Thrones. I love that scene. You have Tyrion as a character. You have Robert Baratheon before he dies. Like they're comical. They could cross over into comical characters. Tyrion has a wise ass comment. It lightens the mood, and then you have that emotional up and down experience, which I think is really important for fiction. I think you could just raise the bar for Battlestar Galactica even higher if they had that. But, it's a tone and they decided on it. And, I'm sure I'll be, who knows, maybe season 4 will be different. I think this was the heaviest of the season so far where I was waiting, for like, all right, when is there going to be like a little bit of levity? Even the boxing episode was heavy. I was like, Jesus, really?
Yeah.
Like, can we just like, laugh for a minute or like, I'm too nervous, I would have never been able to handle Breaking Bad if there wasn't those moments of comedy, which is usually something going awry, usually something Mr. White does wrong or something, So I was just, that was on my mind with the season, but all in all, very enjoyable.
Was it the scene in El Camino, I think it was, where Jesse and Walter are in like a diner? And Jesse's like talking about this stuff, and Walter's like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" Like he's just going like he goes on and on or whatever. People made it.
You're waiting.
Yeah.
I remember talking about that with you specifically during Breaking Bad, like during our episode. Like you're waiting for Walter to weigh in as a father, and Jesse's kind of spilling it. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He's spilling his guts out, and you're waiting for a fatherly response, some sort of warmth, in return. And Mr. White's just like, the fuck are you even talking about right now? It's the type of thing. And it's like, that's what made it. And again, that's kind of, it's heartbreaking, but it's funny. It's a certain style of humor, and it's also it keeps in step with the way the characters are very consistent. The characters are very well realized on the page and in the performances. So yeah, that's up, but you can't be perfect. It ended on such a strong note. Even the extras in episode 19 in the courtroom and stuff, like the way they're reacting in the background, the way Adama is reacting when they find out the colonel's drunk on the stand, like he's not even in the shot. He's barely in the shot. He's in like a racked focus, and you still see Adama's subtle but obvious response. Like it's so good, man. It's like everybody is so dedicated to their role in this thing. And I've seen them talk on panels. Like they were really passionate about this thing. They knew they had something good, and they collectively made it this great series. Good stuff.
I'm glad you feel this way. Yeah, we still have, we have to watch Razor, then season 4, and then The Plan is
there's one more. I thought there was something after that.
Yeah, The Plan is like the stuff from the Cylon perspective. You see like the attack from their perspective.
Oh, that's cool.
So that goes back. Yeah, the movies are like interstitials that go back, which is cool.
I like the Cylon POV. I'm looking forward to more of that in season 4. I hope we get more of that because it gives you a little more, and just because it's complex, it's confusing. So the more we see things from behind their lines,
dude, I can't wait for you to see the Cylons and Razor. Like, I can't wait for you to see them in that. It's gonna be
Razor's
awesome.
gonna
You
be
see
cool.
them more than in that than any other thing you've seen so far. So,
and you know what, dude? I know we got to end this thing, but the Pegasus being destroyed in this season was also very cool because it returns them back to square one.
Right.
You know, that moment of initial hardship where it's like, no, it's one battleship. So that was cool that they did that. I mean, it's heartbreaking because you're kind of rooting for them. It'd be better to have two, but it's kind of neat that they return them to that.
Cool. And also it brings up, and again, you said wrapped it up, but I've been thinking a lot too about like Cylon supply constraints. Like, why are they so supply constrained? They're a machine race. They should, if it's like, just make 50 battle stars and just jump them all in at the same time. Unleash all of your raiders at the same time. Just obliterate these motherfuckers.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's there is a constraint to their power, to their ability to manufacture their bodies, to create the Centurions and the Raiders, and we get more in season 4 as far as like much more into their social order. I can't wait for you to see that.
Oh, that's cool. That's good to know that.
Like where you really know, like you understand more about the Centurions themselves and all of this. It's cool.
That's cool.
Because they're all Centurions.
Yeah, because we don't see a lot of them this season.
No.
Not a lot.
No, and like we never stick on them as far as like things that make decisions that like it's cool. So you'll see more of the hybrids and more of the Cylon ecosystem, I guess, and it is exciting because it finally does start answering. Although, well, we'll wait for the conversation. I'm not even going to say anything else. Dig,
that'll be fun.
Let's end this episode as we do each episode with a dad joke.
Okay, my friend. Listen, I had this dad joke. I couldn't resist. I suspect I might have done it before, so I have a backup. But once I tell you the first dad joke, tell me if you remember this or not. Because I never know if it's something I look over in a list that I never use or somebody sends me. I get a lot of dad jokes DMs, which I got to return to that. I got to use your guys' dad jokes again. I've been doing these on my own. But it's fun using yours. And yeah, let me know if you remember this. I'm not sure. Or if I actually used it. Kyle, R.I.P. boiling water. You will be missed.
That's good shit. That's a good one.
I like that one.
Yeah, that's a good one.
But I may have done that one. I may have done that. So I'll give you one that's maybe one of the worst ones I've ever done. So a proper follow-up.
Please.
Kyle, why do pancakes always win at baseball? You may even get this one.
I don't know.
Because they have the best batters.
That's a good one. I should have gotten that one. That's a frustrating one.
Yeah, that was I feel like that was a possibility,
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And thank you for being here today.
My pleasure.
I mean, we're so pleased. By the way, we got a lot of great, I should have said this at the top, but we've gotten a lot of great feedback for you because people were so pleased that, that you were stressed out and having kind of a, an uncertain time. And so people were really glad that.
With the employment thing?
Yeah. So people were glad to hear you on the last episode. I should have said that at the top. But people were really glad at the in the comments of the last episode that you seemed better. So.
Yeah, I'm glad. But again, I have to reiterate that was a situation of my making. I left a long-term job.
Yeah,
for a very short-term job.
I understand that. It doesn't mean that it's not difficult, and it doesn't mean that you make your bed, but it's like, so what? You still need support and all of that kind of stuff. It's like,
yeah, and you
take risks.
Always great for that.
Yeah, risks don't always work out, but you take them.
No, absolutely not. And I wanted to go direct something, and it was fun to do a pilot. But yeah, not only Kyle, of course, he's my brother, and he's a good brother, good little brother. He's always there for me. But yeah, the audience has been amazing with that. Like genuinely concerned, taking the time out of their busy days to write paragraphs on DM, which I love. I love
sliding
reading
into those DMs.
Super. What a crew. What a crowd you guys are. I appreciate you. Except for you, PJ. I'm not a fan.
Well, fair enough. Dig, good to see you. Thank you for your time. Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of all things Last Stand Media, KnockBack, Sacred Symbols, Defining Duke. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on YouTube. You can leave us nice reviews on iTunes. You can support us, of course, on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia for early ad-free access and the ability to submit questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas, and topic ideas. We'll keep rolling those out as well. That's it. Until next time, goodbye. KnockBack, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show was conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. KnockBack's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including KnockBack, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.